Hello and welcome to the Grid NASCAR Weekend Preview. I'm Tanner Smith from PitboxPress.com, and joining me tonight is Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com. NASCAR is at Homestead-Miami Speedway this weekend, one of the most popular tracks on the NASCAR schedule, and all three series will be taking the track this weekend, so should be a great weekend for multi-groove intermediate action. Before we go any further, I just want to throw a big shout out to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. If you're interested in joining them, there is a link in our description for Patreon. You can also, if you want to do more of a one-time donation, you can buy us a coffee or go through YouTube Super Chat or Super Thanks. And always remember, if you like our content, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and obviously leave us a comment. So let's get right into our questions. So Matthew, Las Vegas provided a great race, and it appears the door was blown wide open for the Cup Series field. With the timing of the last caution, the top three finishers last weekend were Josh Berry, Daniel Suarez, and Ryan Preece. Dirty Air made it hard to get from the back to the front. In Homestead, the corners have multiple grooves from the bottom to the top lane, so if we saw such a shuffle, can drivers further back make it to the front easier than Las Vegas? Or was Las Vegas a clearer indicator of the dirty air impact on this year's Cup car?
Well, that's tough, right, when you think about it, because you feel like Las Vegas and Homestead have so many similarities with they're both intermediate tracks. They both produce some of the best racing we see on the Cup Series schedule week in and week out. But at the same time, I don't think the dirty air will be – it's going to be a factor, yes, but is it going to be as much as a factor? I think it depends on weather. I know we talked about it pre-race between you and I about, like, what's going to happen. I think if there's more grooves, there will be less of a factor, but if we see the sun in a certain position, or we'll talk more about what's going on there at Homestead-Miami Speedway, like on the outside vicinity of it, if there's less grooves, I think the air blocking will be more of a factor, and I think we'll see drivers who are the best blockers in the sport, some guys like Ross Chastain, who is quite impossible to pass, according to many of the drivers on the grid. He hasn't been great here lately. I know he had a second-place finish, I think, a couple years ago, but he really has not been himself at this track. But I think he would be a guy you'd see that would have an advantage, especially if dirty air becomes more of a factor, especially like it was last week. And I think if we see like a shuffle, like obviously a Josh Berry, Daniel Suarez, Ryan Preece 1, 2, 3 is something we have never seen, and I don't know if we'll ever see it again. Just by if you pay attention to Grid Network, you hear us talking, you pay attention to NASCAR Cup Series. The likeliness of that happening was quite improbable, but I think that would be the correct term. But it was pretty awesome to see from an outside perspective, to see first career winner, a guy who's never won a race in third, and then a guy who's only won 2 races in second. That was pretty cool. But I think the driver's Homestead gives you a chance to really get back through the field, whether it's a last lap momentum pass like Tyler Reddick, who nobody thought he was going to take it from Blaney, and then he just held it wide open on the outside. So I think it depends on the lanes as well. So I want to hear your thought on that, though, because I think you have a better answer than me just talking around a little bit. But
yeah, for sure. Just to go back to what you mentioned briefly about Tyler Reddick, he did the 12 questions this week with Jeff Gluck from The Athletic. So if you have a subscription to them, I highly recommend checking out that article, because Reddick kind of delves into what those last few laps really looked like for him. And it was really interesting. But as far as the track itself, I actually expected Las Vegas, with its a bit more aged surface, to be able to kind of have all those extra grooves that they normally have. And it's kind of odd. I feel like Las Vegas in the next gen era has almost gotten worse every year that we've been to it, in the spring anyway. I feel like the fall races end up still being really good, obviously, but I just feel like in the spring, for whatever reason, the track is just not as spread out. And I've got to wonder if it's the temperature there is just not quite warm enough to get these drivers off the apron of the track, basically. You have people basically Harvicking his old Atlanta technique at Las Vegas, and it works. And for a track that has so much racing done on it through its many years, it hasn't been repaved since 2006, so it's old enough to vote. you would think that it would have a little bit more of a spread out groove across multiple lanes. And I even wrote that down in my newsletter for last week, and we just really didn't see that come to pass. And I'm starting to wonder a little bit more about, is Vegas really aging like how we thought it was going to? But I have no doubt that Homestead's going to be hospitable for all of the grooves that it normally is able to carry. It obviously has drivers entering from the top of the track near the wall and riding along the rim, or you have people Harvicking on the apron, diving down to the bottom, getting on the brakes, letting the car kind of roll through the corner, just like Tyler Reddick did on the final lap through turns 1 and 2 in the fall. I do wonder how the potential we'll call it natural disaster that's happening in the area might affect anything that's happening this weekend. We don't really know just yet, and it seems like everybody at the track is kind of nonchalant about it to this point. I don't know if that's a public facing thing or what, but regardless, it seems like we're going to be able to get onto the track this weekend and, go racing. And I think that we'll see everybody pretty spread out. And I'm really hoping that dirty air isn't like such a dominating factor in the conversation. Matthew, do you have anything left to add after that?
I just want to touch on too. I think what's interesting is this is the first spring race. Technically, the last one would have been in winter back in February 2021. But this is the first time we've seen the next gen era go to Homestead during the early season of the year. The last couple of races have all been playoff races, if I'm not mistaken. So I wonder if that's really going to play a factor in what we see on, even for like Trucks Friday, Xfinity Saturday, but especially Cup on Sunday. Because I think air blocking, if, like you say, you don't want it to have such an impact, the dirty air, but I think the weather, especially with the fires and stuff going on down there too, might make a huge difference. So I guess we can only wait till Sunday night to see what really happens. But I just wanted to add that. I think it's interesting. It's their first spring-winter type race there in 4 years.
For sure. It definitely makes me wonder what their plan is for potentially next fall with Homestead. Now, moving on to our next question. So obviously with Josh Berry claiming his first career victory, Ford gets the win in the 5th race of the season, if you can believe it, meaning the Wood brothers are in the playoffs already. Joining them right now are Joe Gibbs Racing and Christopher Bell, and Hendrick Motorsports with William Byron. Over the last 6 races, dating back to the Phoenix finale last year, the winning numbers are 22, 24, 20, 20, 20, and 21. So, Matthew, will the pattern continue this weekend with the number 23 of Bubba Wallace or some other driver with a number in the 20s?
I mean, I'm going to say I don't think it will continue, but however, I do want to touch on Bubba Wallace is the guy in the field that's due for a win. I mean, he has, I should have looked it up. I think it's in the at least the 70s or almost 80s now. It's been since Kansas 2022 when he found victory lane, if you don't count the dual race, obviously, at Daytona. But I think he could do it, and I'm going to tell you why I think he can do it. Because Bubba Wallace is a guy who is a legitimate threat at intermediate speedways, and I think it took him a little bit to get there in his career, but I think he figured it out when he went to 2311, specifically in this next-gen era. So you talked about Homestead. He's only raced here twice, though. He finished 18th and he finished 6th. See, that's a start, what I'm getting at. And he's one of these guys, too, who he might not get hot a lot, but when Bubba Wallace gets hot, he stays hot for a while. Just looking back to the start of the next-gen era, too, or say in 2023, so about the second year of it. When he went to Las Vegas, Kansas, Darlington, and Charlotte, he was 4th, 5th, and 4th. That's just consistency on the board. That's something that he's been getting better at, I think we can see. unfortunately just hasn't seen the win column for that 2311 team. But he's also finished sixth here at Homestead a couple years ago. Like I mentioned, he can get hot, and he's been every race. It seems like he can be up front at these types of tracks. So if he could, I think he could do it. But I think you're more likely to see his teammate Tyler Reddick get it done for 2311 when it comes to this. But it would be pretty funny because, I mean, I think we're all number nerds at some heart, but to have all the numbers in the 20s on the NASCAR grid win the most recent, however, 6-7 races with the 20, the 21, the 22, and then 24. Honestly, if you would have told me that, I guess 7 races ago, right, I would have been like, there's no way the 21's probably going to get a win. Josh Berry shut all of us up, and it's pretty awesome to see, especially for the Ford camp. And if you would have told me, like you had mentioned, I know one of our comments as well, I believe it was from High Flying Bird, said 21 for the win. I think that could be quite a possibility too. Finished 11th here last time he was at the track, so we'll see what happens, dude. It's pretty exciting. I love Homestead-Miami. I know you love Homestead-Miami. And it would be cool from a number standpoint to see Bubba Wallace in the 23 car win, just to have that random NASCAR stat. I can't wait to see it on NASCAR Insights. Maybe we'll have to post it before Trey gets to it.
Perhaps so. Just to give everybody a perfect number on the Bubba Wallace current winless drought, it stands at 87 races dating back to Kansas 2022. And yes, I have to agree with you, Matthew, that Bubba has definitely shown a lot of pace at Homestead in the past, even if you go back all the way to the Truck Series, where he scored a victory in his last race for Kyle Busch Motorsports back in 2014 in that season's finale. He has also shown a significant amount of pace here with 2311. Obviously, you can look back at the 2023 event that you cited, where he ended up slipping to about mid-pack throughout the middle of the race, but towards the end, he got a really great pit stop and then continued to march his way up into the top 10, eventually ended up 6th in the Grimace car. And last year, he performed very well in the first couple of stages, but I believe on one of the final pit stops of the race, he had a less than optimal pit stop and kind of got mired back there with the squirrels and wasn't able to really capitalize with a great car after that, which is unfortunate. But Bubba Wallace has had a lot of strength in practice and qualifying at every track we've been to this season, I would say, outside of Phoenix. And even at Phoenix, by the time Sunday came along, when they put the reds on, Bubba drove all the way through from the 18th place area all the way to 6th before his brake rotor gave out and ended his day. And obviously last week at Vegas, which, as we discussed, is a relatively similar track to Homestead in terms of its banking and kind of like the speed you would carry into the corners and such, he was second in practice, was top 5 in both stages, and unfortunately was kind of wadded up in that backstretch melee closer to the end of the race, which was a bit unfortunate, but sometimes your friends get in your way.
Your best friends too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, sometimes, but regardless, Wallace definitely, I think, has a chance to really make his mark on this season and show how much he's improved. I think that though he hasn't won these past couple of seasons, it's easy to kind of sweep under the rug the fact that he's gotten way more consistent and become a factor at a number of different facilities compared to what he used to be capable of. And it really shows that drivers can grow if you give them the room and the time and the patience to grow. And I think that Charles Denike and Bubba are kind of scratching the surface of their relationship, and I mentioned that in my newsletter with Pitbox Press last week when I picked Bubba to win, that we're only in race 5 at the time. Now we're in race 6, and they have been either strong in qualifying or strong in the race every week. And that's something that even 2 years ago you couldn't say at this point in the season, because Bubba would always get a very slow start. So it'll be interesting to see come Sunday. Obviously we mentioned that a caution at the wrong time can throw off even the best car's really great day. So we'll just have to see. But, yeah, I definitely think Bubba can continue the trend if he's given the right circumstances. Now, we're going to move on to a little bit of betting talk. So, according to DraftKings, as of today, March 20th, 2025, the favorite for Homestead is, of course, none other than Young Money Kyle Larson at plus 400. Tyler Reddick and Ryan Blaney follow him at plus 500, and William Byron, Larson's teammate, the 2021 winner of this event, is fourth at plus 650. Christopher Bell, the 2023 winner of this event, at plus 900. And just in case you're wondering, Josh Berry is at plus 3,000 at 30 to 1 odds. So, Matthew, do you see other contenders besides the five I mentioned? Larson, Reddick, Blaney, Byron, and Bell.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny enough, every winner this year, right, has been a B last name. So maybe a Bowman or Bush or someone up there will get it done. But no, I think there's two that really come to mind. One of them is Denny Hamlin. And the reason why it's because Denny Hamlin he's Denny Hamlin at the end of the day. And because if you look at his finishes, he was third last year. He was seventh so it would have been 3 years ago. 2 years ago, he was insanely quick. He was sixth in the first stage. He was fourth in the second stage. He was third, and then he had an issue. Hit the wall, day's done, DNF. But he was running third with 32 laps to go. So his average finish doesn't look as pretty as it was. But Denny Hamlin is a legitimate threat, I feel, every week. And I think maybe this new Progressive sponsor, which shout out to him getting an 18-race deal with Progressive, bringing them back to the sport. I know they were with Roush at the time before they were RFK, I believe. I think Ryan Newman was still in the 6, if I'm not mistaken, last time Progressive was on the hood of any NASCAR race car. But for Hamlin, I think that could give him a little bit of confidence to go into this race. And, I mean, he's Denny Hamlin at the end of the day. But I think another person who I really think will be a legitimate threat, this is going to sound crazy. I think maybe this is going to be your pick a winner. There's two guys I had in mind there, Tanner. I think AJ Allmendinger is a legitimate threat. I truly believe that in my heart. And I'm going to tell you why. Because AJ Allmendinger is really good at Homestead-Miami. And a lot of people don't give him the credit he deserves. Because I think when he's not on a road course, he is a very quiet race car driver, and he can make his way into the top 20. But if you look at Homestead, he was 8th last year, he was 5th the year before, and he was 3rd the year before that. That's a 5.3 average finish at Homestead-Miami. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for the guys who have been in all 3 races in the next gen era, he's the only one to finish in the top 10 in every single race. So I believe he could get hot, and I know Colleague hasn't been itself lately, but I don't think a lot of us saw Josh Berry and Wood Brothers getting it done. So if we saw an AJ Allmendinger up in the top 5, I think he could do something with it.
So Allmendinger is not my pick, and I'm not going to spoil it now. But I will say that is very good stat digging from you. So yes, Allmendinger has definitely shown a great bit of pace at Homestead in the past, and I think a lot of that has to do with him just being a veteran driver and knowing how to save tires, which will definitely come at a premium this weekend, and I cannot stress that enough. These tires, once they hit the racetrack, it's like a cheese grater, and yes, you can fill in as many cheese grater Larry Mack gifts that you want. But yeah, it's not an exaggeration. That track hasn't been repaved since early 2003. So it's definitely an aging track surface that has been well worn down, and it makes for great racing. And I think, like you said, Hamlin is going to be somebody to look out for. I think someone like Kyle Busch, if RCR can hit the setup for Homestead, they'll be in great shape. And it does sound like RCR got a fair few of the cast-off SHR employees after that team dissolved and reformed into Haas factory team. So you mentioned Josh Berry earlier had an 11th place run there last year. Maybe some of those principles from last year with those SHR members can be carried over to that 8 into the 3 car to a lesser extent. Now, I will say, I think someone like Joey Logano has got to be somebody you look at. He definitely knows how to get around tracks where tire management is a bit more stressed. He's won at Darlington before. He obviously has won here back in 2018 when he claimed his maiden title in the Cup Series. So those would be some names I would look out for. But just throwing this out there on the outside, someone like Michael McDowell, who, again, knows how to take care of his equipment, knows how to, move forward. Carson Hocevar last year had a really strong run at Homestead, and, using the data from him and from all the Hendrick cars that they have access to, maybe McDowell makes a run this weekend. Who's to say? Moving on to our next section, I believe, Matthew, it is your turn to take over.
Hey, sounds good to me there, Tanner. So we talked earlier, I know you mentioned about Homestead-Miami and Las Vegas. They're identical, but they're not similar in terms of like the track product. But one thing that is identical is the stages. So the stages end on lap 80, lap 165, and then if there are no late race cautions, it will end at lap 267. And we saw how the timing you also mentioned about the caution during the first green flag pit stops, it really shakes the team's entire strategy up. And we saw multiple teams have a lot of tire issues. I know you mentioned that too, and then you get a little worried, right? But there were tires, loose wheels, anything that could go wrong for some of these teams went wrong. And 2 of those teams were Chase Briscoe in the 19 and Kyle Busch in the 8. They both lost the tire on the track. And then also we saw something that we can't really remember what we've seen in a while is Christopher Bell had an issue where they didn't tighten the lug nut and he stopped in Briscoe's pit box, which they just came out with a ruling. I believe you could touch on that too. I can as well. But I'm going to ask you this because I know we're talking about tires. Do you think it will be repeated, the issue that we had last week?
I can't really say that because we don't really have a definitive, explanation for why it was happening, because at the end of the day, pit stops are a crucial part of every race, and if there was something wrong with equipment, something wrong with the nuts that they were trying to screw onto the hubs, we don't know. That's the weird part about everything that happened last week. Now, obviously, I'm completely spitballing here, and I could totally be wrong, but I have to think maybe it had something to do with sand, maybe being present in the area. I know that I can't remember if it was Harvick or if it was Boyer, but somebody on the broadcast mentioned that in the turns, sand can kind of get on the racetrack. So I think that might be a possibility. And since we're going to South Florida, I would not be surprised if it was sand at Vegas causing all of these issues, that we could see them pop up again, given that we're near a beachy area. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't have been something else, but again, we just really don't know what was causing those issues definitively without NASCAR or the teams coming out and saying something. As for that ruling, I don't really think we needed an additional rule. It's still pitting outside the box, is it not? Yeah, it was a unique situation. You'd really prefer it not happen, but at the same time, it prevented a bad thing from happening. So, and he still ended up having to go to the back of the line anyway. So, I don't know. It just seems like you're writing a rule to make a rule rather than writing it to actually fix something. So, that's neither here nor there. Now, to get back to the initial question at hand here, I think as far as just any actual tire issues are concerned, like blowouts or anything like that, I don't think we'll see a whole lot of those. I'm sure they're bringing the same tire or a similar one that they brought last fall, and I expect it to pretty much act the same. But as far as the lug nuts are concerned, until I hear an explicit explanation as to why that kept happening, I'm going to assume it's not going to rear its ugly head. But again, because we don't know, I can't really speak on it. Did you have any theories on it?
I think it's one of those things. Even if you're educated on tires and stuff like that, it's one of those things. I think, like you're saying, if it happens, it happens. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I don't think there's really set data that can prove that it's more likely to happen at a specific track when the weather's this and so on and so forth. But you did bring up a couple interesting points. I know that mentioned like the tires and the cheese graters. I really think it would be awesome. I know you've written for Pitbox Press and you mentioned how you would fix certain things in NASCAR in one of your stories. So make sure you guys check that out at pitboxpress.com. Look up Tanner's name. But one thing I think is really interesting is if they were to bring like the option tire to a track like this, it would remind me of, was it Bristol last year where it was like tires were just falling off crazy? I think a race like that would be exciting. But no, but besides the point, I think tire issues I don't know if you can't really say definitively if it's going to be a lug nut issue or if it's going to be a wear issue. I think we're more likely to see wear because you saw with Denny Hamlin, like I mentioned 2 years ago. And then I believe it was Kyle Larson, right? Was Homestead the track where he snapped and hit the wall really hard? Or was this another one? I know it was Larson, but I'm trying to think where.
You're thinking of Atlanta, I believe.
Oh, yes, he did that too. But I think he also had an issue with tires where he had one go down. I believe it was at Homestead. Not the same incident, obviously, but it just goes to show that even the best drivers at this track will have issues just by tires. And even if you can save them, I know we talked about guys like Michael McDowell, who knows his equipment, one of the best at saving tires. Issues can just come out of nowhere. Whether it's the driver and tire, you can blame the tire, or the pit crew, like what happened with Kyle Busch and stuff like that. But I know, like we talked about, I got to figure out when that Kyle Larson incident was. I know he hit the wall. I know we talked about that pre-race where Kyle Larson hit the wall when it was going on the pit road. But I really think he did something. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on the question. I can, if you want to look that up, if Kyle Larson's had tire issues here. And I apologize if he hasn't, because then I'm just making stuff up. But I really thought he did. But yeah, like you were saying though too, it just you can't really say definitively. I want to hear the people in the comments or in the chat room if they think there's going to be any issues with the tire. I think we're more likely to see tire wear though, versus I would say tire lug nut and those issues where they're flying off. I don't know if you had anything else to add to that, and then we can continue on.
The particular article that I believe Matthew was trying to point you all towards is a little bit of a how I would fix stage racing in NASCAR document, and I think having these very poorly constructed 80, 100 races is just not really something that entertains the crowd at the track or at home. And yeah, it would be nice if NASCAR had a little bit more flexibility with how they approach stage racing. I think that it would be better if we did stages in a way where the first stage goes without a necessary green flag pit stop entirely. We just run the first 10% of a race. We throw the stage caution at about lap 30 at Homestead, and then we go through a normal green flag run, go all the way through to about lap 100, lap 110, and then run the rest of the race after that. I think most people would prefer a short run, then a long run, and then an actual race. I think that with how stages are currently set up, you only get one green flag pit stop per stage, and it kind of pigeonholes strategy. And I think that last week is a perfect indicator of why this brand of stage racing just doesn't work. And that's setting several cars way behind the 8 ball on lap 40 just because they had to pit. So, yeah, it was a really unfortunate circumstance what happened last week, and I think it's something that if NASCAR was a little bit more creative and imaginative, they could avoid going forward. But that's all I really needed to say about that. Now, as far as the Larson thing, were you able to find anything about that?
Yeah, so I looked it up, and similar incidents happened where he was running second and had a tire go down and hit the wall, I believe it was. So last year at Homestead during stage one, he was running second, had a flat tire, hit the wall. But then it's Kyle Larson. So he just came back and finished. I believe he was in the top 15 because he's just that good at this track. So I found it. I kind of had 3 or 2 races combined in the one, but I figured it out. It was the October Homestead race, the only Homestead race of last year. So we got it, just to clarify.
Well, he made his way all the way back up to second, and then with about 13 to go, I think it was, he tried to split it 3 wide between the leader Ryan Blaney and a lapped car in Austin Dillon and wrecked himself. And that's kind of what set the stage for Reddick coming back there at the end. But yeah, I'm glad you're able to find that because I vaguely remembered it, but I was like, is he just talking about the pit barrels or when he wrecked into Dillon? And it was neither. So I'm glad you were able to track that down.
It took me a little bit, but we figured it out. So I apologize to those listening, hearing me ramble in a circle trying to figure that out. But this is just one of those races. It's crazy. And I think we've seen 7 past winners in the last 7 races here. And that's awesome. I mean, when you think of what NASCAR's trying to do, to have that much parity, to have 7 winners in 7 races here. So I'm going to ask you this because I know we talked a lot about the configuration and stuff. Do you believe the way Homestead is configured, the racing product has made it a competitive track? Or do you think it's more about the drivers being the best on those specific days to win those races?
I mean, the fact that there's been 7 different winners in the past 7 events leads me to believe that the track is what's generating all of this. I don't want to call it randomness because it's never somebody that's completely out of left field winning these races at Homestead. But of those last 7, let's count them out. Joey Logano, 2018, Kyle Busch, 2019, Denny Hamlin, 2020, Byron, 2021, Larson, who is the only one of those that I think truly dominated the race outside of Hamlin, who that was the COVID year. So if you landed the setup right coming out of the truck, you were probably going to win. And in 23, we had Bell, and 24, obviously, we had Reddick. So, yeah, there isn't really a consensus outside of like the Toyotas are very strong at this track, obviously. Now, as far as the track itself and how it's laid out, I think that it definitely lends to a car that may be ill handling at one line. You can take it somewhere else on the track. You can find a different way to enter and exit the corner that kind of helps offset those issues more or less. And because there's just so much variation in how the track is set up, it allows any car really to be fast if you set it up properly. Now, as far as the drivers being the best on those days to win, I honestly feel like that happens so little in modern NASCAR. I think the stat is somewhere around 33 to 30% of races in with the fastest car truly winning the race. And, you know, that's not a knock on anybody. It's just circumstantial a lot of times. But, I mean, you look at the last couple of years, the fastest car to me has been the 12 car, and he still hasn't won here. So maybe he can be the 8th person in 8 years to win at this track. So, yeah, there are definitely drivers that their skill sets kind of lend to this racetrack, but at the same time, this track kind of offers everything to anybody. It is a very fast track, but there's a lot of tire wear, so you see a lot of comers and goers. You see cars that are more engineered for the short run, kind of lag back towards the end, and those cars that are a little bit more engineered towards the long run start to make their way back up. And, you know, obviously which car wins depends on when the last caution comes out and how well your pit crew does on pit road. So hopefully everybody screws their lug nuts on tight this week, and we won't really have those issues that we had last week. But I think that Homestead is probably the best track in the sport in terms of like the racing product it's able to produce. And honestly, I would love it if either it comes back as the championship race even as early as next year, because we don't really have anything slated for that spot next season, or it should get a second date if it's not going to be the finale. But that's just how I feel. What about you, Matt?
No, I mean, absolutely. I can agree with that. And it shows one of the reasons why it's one of the best tracks, if not the best track on the NASCAR circuit, is because of the fact that so many different things can happen. Obviously, 7 different winners. And also, the races are the ones you remember, I feel. I mean, the Tyler Reddick win last year was one of those that you can play in the back of your head with Blaney and Hamlin and Reddick, and all of a sudden Reddick just right on the outside goes by. It's like that's something that hits the highlight reel. And then even if you go back before the next gen era, the Kyle Busch championships, the Joey Logano first championship, Jimmy's last, it's like those are just highlight reel moments in this sport. And it's truly an amazing track. But in terms of like, do I think I just named like either Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers there with the highlight reel guys, but I think it's interesting about if it's going to be the driver or I guess the product of the track. Reddick had 57 points last year, but Blaney was second right there. Bell had 42 points in the year before, but Blaney had 53, outscored him there. And then the year prior, when Larson won both stages and dominated the race, Ross Chastain, that was the last time at Homestead where he was really up front. So I think there can be some parity here. I think Blaney is definitely a pick a winner for a lot of people, especially because of how good Ryan Blaney is. And he's one of the B last name drivers that hasn't won this year. And he's always a threat, especially on these intermediate tracks. Ryan Blaney is one of those guys. He's a threat everywhere. I mean, we haven't really seen him do much on road courses, but I still would never count him out. And then, yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about it. It's one of those tracks that just gets you excited, man. I mean, just Homestead-Miami, just like you were saying, it sucks that it's not the championship finale, but if it's not going to be, it's that one track on the schedule where you really want it to have 2 dates. But I don't know if you want to touch on any more of that, because I think you made a lot of great points too.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I think that it would be really cool if Ross, a Alva, Florida native, not very far away, if he was able to actually be competitive at this track. But he finished like 30th and was just not a factor at all last year. So hopefully this year that will change.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, there's a lot of guys I think we're about to talk about now that haven't been factors, but the last couple weeks they seemingly have been. So let's talk about the guys at Spire Motorsports, RFK Racing, and Front Row Motorsports. I mean, Spire is one of those teams I think we've seen this year has had speed, but just cannot close out the deal. I mean, Michael McDowell was on pole in a Spire car, their first ever pole in the NASCAR Cup Series, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But they didn't finish the race out well. And then you got Front Row. Noah Gragson was in the top 10 and then had an issue going in turn 1. So it's just one of those things. But then you go to RFK, right? You had Ryan Preece was battling for a win in that number 60 car. I wouldn't be shocked if he proved me wrong in our predictions when I said this is his make or break year. I think a lot of us did, but he's been up front, so I got to give credit where credit's due. So I'm going to ask you about, we mentioned those 3 guys, or teams, I should say, as well. Do you anticipate any of those teams battling up to have a top 5 or even I guess top 10 would be more of a realistic prediction, I feel, but do you feel any of that?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously Gragson had a fair amount of success here in the Xfinity Series. One of the debatably funniest moments in Xfinity Series history came in I believe it was the 2021 event there in the Xfinity Series when Gragson had like a 10-second lead on the field with 2 laps to go. He was coming to take the white flag, and then David Starr just blows a tire right in front of him and ruins his day. I don't think I could have ever expected something like that to happen, like right in front of the leader at that point in time. So just a really hard day for that 9 crew at the time. But Gragson definitely has shown a lot of pace at this track in the lower series and should be somebody to potentially look out for as like a dark horse here. Zane Smith has definitely put in some solid efforts here in the truck series, but I haven't really seen anything out of him in his cup appearance there that would really lead me to believe that he's going to be like super strong. Same thing with Todd Gilliland to this point. As far as Spire's concerned, Hocevar, you've definitely got to look at him. He had a top 10 here last year with very little to no notebook underneath him. And, obviously he kind of had some odd things happening around him with the LaJoy and Haley swap happening late last season. So hopefully with a little bit more cohesion on that team this season, with McDowell coming in as a bit more of a veteran, it'll definitely help propel them forward going into this weekend. And then obviously we have RFK, who it's so weird. They had really strong cars here in either 2020 or 2021. I want to say it was 21 when I think Busher and Newman both just charged through the field in the first stage, and I believe one of them won it. And I just keep wondering where that speed has gone, especially when they're strong at tracks that are somewhat similar to it in terms of like surface profile, like a Darlington, for instance, where last year they probably had the best 2 cars in town that weren't the 45, and one of them ended up winning the race. So, yeah, I think RFK, they're in kind of a weird spot because they have Priest, who's their new car, running better than their main 2 cars. And especially Brad, I'm just like, all right, when are you and Jeremy Bullins going to get it together and start putting those results together? And hasn't quite come to pass yet, and I don't expect it for the 6 crew to really progress in the right direction this weekend. Now, at Martinsville, that might be when you see the 6 car start to show up, but this weekend, I don't see the 6th really doing well, but maybe Busher and Priest start to eke their way towards the end of the race back into the top 10 conversation. So of those 3, I would say that Spire's probably got the best shot to snag a top 5 or a top 10, and then RFK, and then Front Row, just because Front Row has less drivers I think are capable of getting a top 10 here.
No, I mean, absolutely. I can agree with a lot of what you just said. And yeah, a lot of people, I know we've talked about Ty Gibbs, just on a side point, having the absolute worst possible start. Like at this point last year, he was 3rd in the standings. Now he is barely
35th.
34th to 35th, something crazy. We're not talking about, I know Noah Gregson's 33rd, but Brad Keselowski's 30th right now. I mean, that's kind of crazy. He's only 1 point ahead of Shane Van Gisbergen, who we're calling is having a very difficult time adjusting to the ovals and stuff on the Cup Series side. But Zane Smith's actually ahead of Brad in points as well. So these guys need to have great races. And I think, like you mentioned, Ryan Preece, especially last week, he's been one guy who I think can have another top 10 finish. Like you were saying, I think he's the one you're probably the most confident in. So I never thought, I mean, no offense to Ryan Preece, but if it wasn't like a short track, I really wouldn't have thought I would ever say that I'd be more confident in him to succeed at Homestead-Miami than I would Chris Buescher, who's been one of the best drivers, I think, arguably for Ford in the last couple seasons. And then a champion in Brad Keselowski, too. So I guess we'll see what happens on the RFK side. And the Front Row side, too. Zane Smith hasn't had the best start of the year, but I think he's one of those guys that will get the momentum like he did at the end of last year. Michael McDowell, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, how he'll do. That's a wrong team. So Spire, I know we'll talk about Zane Smith. these guys, they swap teams and it's like trades, it feels like, but not the actual trade. So I apologize. But Spire, let's talk about front row. I'm sorry. Noah Gragson can ride the high line, especially in the Xfinity series, like nobody. I mean, he's one of the best here. Obviously, David Starr's tire issue in the Whataburger car, I believe, really ruined his 10-second lead at the end of that race a couple of years ago. I don't know if I have as much confidence in him, but I think of all the guys on Spire, RFK, and front row, like we talked about, I think Hocevar, like I know we were talking about earlier, Carson Hocevar is one of those guys who I think the whole field is mad at him. Kyle Busch was on Kevin Harvick's podcast, said that this kid never learns or something, and talked about how he wrecked him in a super late model race or something, gosh, like 8 years ago, and said Hocevar never said anything. I mean, you take that from Bush's perspective. Obviously, we haven't heard Carson's yet, but Hocevar was, I think he was 5th in stage 1, 8th in stage 2 last year, and then finished 9th. That was a great point state for a rookie last year in Carson Hocevar. So, especially how, I guess, much, I can't really say he's been getting a lot better, but I think a win is due for him. I'm not going to say it's this year or this race, but I think he's building that momentum. So if it's any of those guys on any of those teams, I think it'd be Carson Hocevar. I never thought I would really say that of those guys. I don't know about Justin Haley though. He's been just quiet. I think a lot of these teams like RFK, I think, had a lot of faith in him. There was the rumors that he would be the guy to replace Brad. That's why he went to Rick Ware Racing. And then you have, and then obviously Kaulig had a lot of faith in him. And now Spire has a lot of faith in him to trade for him. So I guess we'll see if he can build that momentum up. But I don't know if you have anything else to add. Those are a lot of random points there that I made. And I apologize for mixing those teams up. It's not often you see driver swaps like indirectly, like what front row inspired obviously was Zane Smith and all that jazz. So I'll stop.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, I didn't mention Haley at all in my segment because that team has been non-existent this year, and I think they just paid Rodney Childers $1.5 million, and he really hasn't been really worth it to this point. Like, you're getting boat raced at Phoenix, of all places, where your old driver, you made setups for him that had him driving miles around the field. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on over at that 7 team. It's kind of concerning me. And, I've been the kind of person that's like, pump the brakes on, giving Ty Gibbs, a lot of flack. So it's pretty telling to me when the other 2 teammates are top in the practice sheet at places like Phoenix and you're in 14th. So, yeah. Moving on to our next question. So I think we've kind of touched on this a couple of times throughout this, but there have been some rumors swirling around that Homestead-Miami Speedway might see some construction to host a championship race for NASCAR after this year's event. So obviously the championship for 2026. Fans have expressed their desire to see such a move be made, and obviously Homestead consistently provides a great racing product. So Matthew, do you agree with Homestead potentially hosting the final race, or should NASCAR consider ideas like rotating the finale and letting other tracks host?
So it's funny. I was thinking about it, right? I've said a lot of stuff on Grid Network that I've had confidence behind my statements. But one thing, this is going to be the most confident in any answer I've ever given, is I absolutely 100, even over 100%, if that's a possibility, believe that Homestead should be the last race in all of NASCAR, just because of how amazing this track has been in general. But even with this product of the next gen car on the intermediate tracks, it's just Phoenix it's a short track, it's a 1 mile, but it's not a bad track. It's just, it doesn't bring that oomph and that excitement as Homestead-Miami does. And also, I mean, geographic wise too, that Homestead-Miami just brings that extra flair, that excitement that get people down there. And plus the weather's usually nice, but I know we're going to touch on that. But it should. And do I think NASCAR should consider ideas like rotating? Absolutely, I do. I think Phoenix has done a decent job. I think especially the Penske boys love that Phoenix is the last race because they always figure it out in this era. And then other guys who used to figure it out, like the Chevrolets, and especially Hendrick Motorsports, like obviously Chase Elliott won his championship here, Kyle Larson won his championship here. But lately, in terms of the last race of the year, it's been all Ford. For them, or not Ford. Sorry, that's Phoenix. I'm talking about Phoenix. My bad. So Phoenix, that's the one track that a lot of the guys have been hot at, but then Homestead, it's been a whole different story. That's why I guess I made my case for it to not be at Phoenix, was the fact that Penske, they're the only team that probably want to keep it there. So my bad, just to clarify. But I mean, it would be awesome. I mean, do they consider where NASCAR, the main hub is? Do they put the last race at Charlotte? That would be interesting. I don't like I think you need to have a intermediate to short track. I don't think you need to have a longer intermediate, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does, but I feel like you need quicker lap times for the championship race. Like, you don't want to see it at kind of a longer intermediate speedway. But I wouldn't say Texas, though. Please do not bring the championship to Texas. Please. I know. Yeah, please don't do that. But I think Homestead's the best bet. And unfortunately, Kansas, I think, has been a top 3 product in the sport. But no offense to Kansas, but are you going to host the championship race at Kansas? Unless you're guaranteed to have a finish like Busch or Larson, where 2 championship contenders, you're probably not going to do that. So I suggest, I mean, Miami would be the best bet, but I wouldn't be opposed to having a Charlotte, a Homestead. Homestead's the guaranteed, though. But I mean, where else would you do it? That kind of be the question I want to ask NASCAR. If they consider rotating it, what are the options? But I definitely want to hear your opinion on this one.
I want the camera to focus in on me because I got some words I got to throw out here. NASCAR has, since they moved the championship away from Homestead to Phoenix, they have consistently pointed to the facilities at Homestead-Miami Speedway not being up to snuff. The just people coming in through the ticketing gates, there just haven't been enough of them. Now, if you go to you'll find that it's NASCAR themselves that own the racetrack. This sounds like problems that you all are creating. Like, you can't, it's so frustrating. You cannot have a property and then criticize that property for not performing when it's your fault. Like, this is stuff that NASCAR's people that work at Homestead are not fulfilling or not getting done. And I don't know if it's they want like tax money from the surrounding area to help pump these upgrades in or what, but like they had to have ISM, a company, come in and help facilitate all those Phoenix renovations that eventually got it the championship race. So are we going to have like some company come in like Gainbridge and help sponsor Homestead for a couple of years to help pay for it getting renovations or something like that? It's just so silly. Like, and this is part of why NASCAR really shouldn't be in the business of owning tracks and owning facilities. And it's reasons like this. Like, you complain about there not being enough accessibility or enough modernization at a track facility, and you own the track. You cannot point out flaws of a place that you own and act like it's somebody else's fault. Like, it is just so silly to me. And just to kind of wrap a bow on this, yes, I want Homestead to host the finale. Yes, I want there to be a rotation as well. Now, that obviously brings up the conversation, what other tracks would you like to put there? And obviously, I think someplace like Darlington would be an interesting place, but unfortunately, you can't really move the Southern 500, and I wouldn't want to do that anyway. There's Kansas, but as we've seen with the dreaded Kansas 2 from 2020, where Logano just aero blocked Kevin Harvick for 30 laps towards the end of that race, it gets really cold in Kansas City around that time of year. So maybe not the best. Maybe we need to, I don't know, shrink the schedule or something like that to be more accommodating to this kind of conversation. But, a nice track in Fontana would have been nice to go to around November, but we had to go and sell that to Amazon or whatever. So, yeah, the whole conversation around Homestead has been painfully frustrating for me to listen to, especially as this lawsuit has raged on and we found out, more about NASCAR's inner workings and stuff like that. So yeah, I want Homestead to be the finale, and if it's not the finale, I want 2 races there. The racing product is just too good for us to keep like holding it to one. But I see that you had something you wanted to add, so I'll let you cook.
I don't think I can cook as much as you just did, but I'm pretty sure the tracks we mentioned, I know I definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked about like Kansas, we talked about Darlington. I think Darlington would be a great option, but just in terms of the seating, stuff like that, Homestead. I'm pretty sure NASCAR owns all of them. I think those are some of the tracks on the schedule that NASCAR owns. So, yeah, so it would be pretty cool. You think from a marketing standpoint, you think from a business standpoint. There's no doubt NASCAR is going to have a championship race or at least the final couple of races at a track they own. It makes sense. I mean, if I own NASCAR, I'd do the same thing. However, though, like you talked about with the issues, like, oh, there's issues here, that's why we don't have it. Well, we fix the issue. I mean, if you really want it to succeed, and I think NASCAR is recognizing that's why there's conversations happening, that Homestead-Miami is just a dang good racetrack, especially in this car. And that's why I think we'll see more intermediates along the way, because they're realizing what's selling, what the fans want to see. And I think most of the fans want to see Homestead-Miami being the final race. So I just wanted to add that to you. I think there's not as many options, though, like you said, for a final race. I mean, Charlotte, sure. But Darlington, Richmond, I think Richmond would be interesting, but it's also like you don't really want a short track. I feel like you kind of want in the middle, and also there's not going to be that much excitement. I think if you go to Arizona or Phoenix, there's excitement. You go to Homestead-Miami, there's excitement. Charlotte, I know Kobe's from Charlotte. He can attest to that. Charlotte's an exciting area. I've been there a few times. Absolutely love it. But I don't know if there's that much excitement if you went to, say, Kansas City during November or something like that. So we'll see what happens. I know we're going to remember this conversation, and hopefully when the news comes out that Homestead-Miami is the final race starting in 2026, I think that'd be exciting. Obviously, that's a hypothetical. I have no information on that, but I think try to speak that, manifest it, right?
Indeed. I'm just going to throw one other idea out there before we move on to our next topic. Just sell the rest of the Fontana land and throw some money at Kevin Harvick's Kern County Raceway.
Yes.
Like, mic drop on that. Like, it's a perfect little racetrack. It's in a really good spot in California where it's not quite in SoCal, where it might be in threat eventually of being taken over by land developers, kind of like Irwindale before it. And yeah, that would be my suggestion for taking care of having a third place to go that NASCAR owns or has some sort of control over. The final thing that we've been following this weekend, though, is there's a grass fire in Homestead. People in the area have shared images and videos with the fire being visible from the racetrack, and as of this evening, on Thursday, March 20th, the fire is currently 30% contained. The mayor of Homestead said he expects the NASCAR weekend to continue as planned. So, Matthew, are you worried at all that the grass fire could end up impacting the race weekend, despite most officials not showing any concerns?
I will touch on that in a second. I do want to mention Kern County is like one of the best racetracks in the nation. I mean, what the Kevin Harvick team does to that racetrack. They had a late model race. I was watching it from the Team Hornaday perspective. It was I love that freaking track, dude. That track is so awesome, and I would love if Kevin Harvick was able to host. I know the ARCA West was out there, and the Cars Tour West was out there, but yeah, let's put that on the damn schedule. That is a wonderful track. I am a big Kern County Raceway supporter. But in terms of, let's get serious. So I'm sorry, but every time Kern County is mentioned, I just love it and I want to talk about it. But I'll get past that. But no, in a serious issue though, there is a grass fire going on in the Homestead-Miami area. In fact, I'm up in central New York, in Syracuse. They have had fires, and it sucks. It's a scary thing because that stuff spreads, and a lot of it has to do with wind, as we saw in California too. I mean, I feel so horrible for all those people out that way. Just the wind is like, there's only so much water you can put on fire and stuff like that. But if it's windy, it's just so hard to contain. And I know as of today, March 20th, 2025, they've announced about 30% of it. There's still a little worrisome. I know I mentioned earlier, I believe it's like, I don't know if we're as concerned about it. I think there's experts for a reason. Sometimes you see experts make decisions and you're like, oh, probably shouldn't do that. And then especially environmental stuff like that. But in terms of this, you got to have trust in them. You do. And I think if they're really the big, huge event like this, there's a lot of racing going on in Florida. I know there's a couple late model, the whole Pensacola and Five Flags has a huge weekend coming up right there. I know there's a couple truck guys actually running some late model races in the ASA National Tour down there too. Right near Homestead-Miami. It's huge. It's busy. So there's a lot of stuff that can be affected by this. So I think knowing that and them not as worried about it makes you feel a little bit good on the inside. But at the same time, if there's a big wind, and anything can change. And I know up here, they had a couple of days ago where a storm came in. It was like 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts. I mean, that might not sound like a lot with rain, but when there's fire attached to that and it's the dry grass from having hot sun hit the weather. I mean, up here in central New York, I was telling you guys in the chat, our weather, I had a 75-degree day yesterday, March 19th. Today was 65. It's calling for snow in the next couple of days, and it's going to drop down to the 30s. And before that, it was 30 and snowy. So it shows that when the weather changes so fast, I'm not a meteorologist at all. And there's a joke, Tanner, I think before you started here, Alex Anderson with the Gay Racing Podcast made a funny joke. I was pointing, I think it was Daytona, or it was either the Rolex 24 or something. We were joking about the weather forecast, and I was pointing to my fake green screen behind me about the weather. So I'm no meteorologist. But when that happens, especially the dry grass and the sun, it's scary, and then it's hard to contain. So 30%, you got to trust. I guess you got to trust the experts, and if you don't, then you don't. I mean, that it is what it is. There's nothing you and I can do about it except just hope for the best.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I am not going to worry about it. Obviously, my condolences go out to anybody that's affected by it. And it's an awful thing that's happening. You never want to see a natural disaster of any kind spout up anywhere, let alone coming to a race weekend. This isn't unheard of, though, for NASCAR. We got to throw all the way back to 1998 when Jeff Gordon was stomping everybody, and they had to move the Daytona summer race to October, which obviously would be a lot more tricky, a lot more tricky to do nowadays, considering we have playoffs and things like that, and established schedules. The one thing that I'm a little concerned about is, if this does escalate to a point where the wildfires affect the track activity, where do you move it to on the calendar? And I would imagine they're not going to move it to the off week for Easter, because obviously there is racing that weekend that isn't the Cup Series, because obviously the Xfinity and Truck Series will be going to Rockingham during Easter weekend. So I would imagine that it would have to be moved to some sort of a midweek race, probably right before the Daytona cutoff, if I had to take a guess, which would be interesting. And I would be very intrigued as to how NASCAR would handle that kind of a situation in today's world. So, yeah, I'm not really concerned about it because the officials aren't really concerned about it to this point. And I just kind of have to trust their judgment because, like you said, neither of us are meteorologists. So, yeah, it's an awful situation. You never want to see that happen to any sort of community anywhere, it's obviously affecting people, and that's not great, but it is what it is. Hopefully they can get more of that contained by the end of tonight, and tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday can go by without a hitch. But if not, we'll be here with all the information you'll need, I'm sure. So moving on to our final bit here, we're picking a winner. So Matthew, obviously you are our defending champion at Grid, and Matt White is the first now to reach double digits this season. We have the NASCAR Cup Series at Homestead-Miami. We encourage everyone here to comment who you think will win. Also, share your picks for World Rally Championship, IndyCar at Thermal, and Formula One. So, Matthew, who is your pick a winner for Homestead this weekend?
It's tough. I don't know if I have a set one because I like to wait for the last minute Grid Network TV's text account. You'll notice I'm one of the few that comments. But yeah, as defending champion, I think I'm tied with the only other guy that's won all the other championships, and that's Kobe, one of the best in the business. So shout out to Matt White. I'm going to say tentatively, I think tentatively I'm going to actually go with Tyler Reddick. And I think the reason why is because of how fast he's been. And he's been the second best Toyota this season. Obviously, that was in the stratosphere. But then Reddick's been up there in points with him. So I'm excited. You want me to give all my picks and then I'll let you get to NASCAR, or how do you want to do that?
Sure. Go ahead and reel them all off.
So WRC, which gets the picks in quickly, I think I went with Tanaka. I think he's too fast. So I'm going to give that team that. Indy at Thermal, I am going to go with one of the best IndyCar drivers who can be one of the best all time if he stays in it. I think Alex Palou obviously won last year. Didn't pick him, I don't believe so. I think this year. I think that might be the one that sticks. And then F1, I don't know. Tentatively, you just want to go with Max Verstappen, but Lewis Hamilton, my apologies. And Ferrari didn't have a lot of pace, but I think he could be a threat. 2 Chinese Grand Prix, very good there. I'm going to stick Max, I guess, tentatively. But I want to hear yours. I might change mine, so make sure to follow Grid Network TV at X. That's where I make my picks. And if you guys can't do it on the live stream, make sure you do it on any of our social media platforms. And Kathy, bro, I know that name. Kathy, it's my mother. Thanks for watching, Mom. Joey Logano is her pick. She always picks him. She makes to let me know about her picks when he wins. And he's been winning a lot. So not this year, though. So, yeah, so. What about you, Tanner? I would love to hear your picks because you're battling up there too your first season.
Well, I don't like to brag, but yeah, I've definitely had some very fortunate picks this year to this point. Now, I was leaning towards Ryan Blaney at the beginning of this week. And Matthew, I'm going to give you one opportunity to guess who the driver is that I'm going to pick because I know you've been champing at the bit trying to figure it out. So who do you think it is?
You know, honestly, I really thought you were going to go with Carson Hocevar, but I don't think
you got it. You got it. Oh. Look at this man. He's so good at picking a winner. He picked my winner. Yes, it is. It is, in fact, Spire Motorsports sophomore driver Carson Hocevar. The kid drove all the way to the top 10 last year at a track that is notorious for chewing rookies up and spitting them out. And he has won here in the Truck Series, and with Spire Motorsports having not only more funding, but more experience on that team with Justin Haley and Michael McDowell coming to the team, and not to mention the 2 crew chiefs that have come with both of them in Travis Peterson in the 71 and obviously Rodney Childers in the 7 car. Obviously, they're all coming together to make each other better to an extent. I obviously don't know how much setup sharing they're doing within the shop because it sounded like at the beginning of the season, Rodney Childers kind of made it sound like they aren't really doing a whole lot of, chatting about setups in the shop, but hopefully that's changed since then. Hocevar has been fast at every track we've gone to this year outside of Daytona, and they had some sort of really weird mechanical snafu that kind of got in their way of having a good effort there. And I just suspect that him coming to this track for the second time, in this kind of car and with a better support system around him compared to last year late in the season, he's going to be there towards the end of the race. And I think we could see back-to-back first-time winners in the NASCAR Cup Series for the first time in a couple years.
I think that's a great pick. I'm kind of surprised I got it. I think Ty Gibbs is another guy. He's probably not the best here, but I think he's due like Kosovar, like you were saying. But yeah, guys, make sure though. I know I'm touching. Make sure World Rally Championship, IndyCar, F1, NASCAR. Get on that leaderboard with Tanner and I, and then obviously Matt White's putting a whooping to all of us right now. But Matt, we're coming for you, man. It took me a while last year to get into rhythm. I think we can do it again.
Indeed, indeed. Now, as we come here to the end of our show, I would like to throw out my IndyCar pick. I think it'll be Pato O'Ward in thermal. And as for F1, I'm going with Oscar Piastri. Now, as we close out our show, I'd like to remind everybody of our upcoming programming. We have Women in Motorsport tomorrow, Friday. On Saturday, we'll have Grid Live pre-race for F1 and IndyCar. And Sunday, obviously, we'll have Grid Live wrap-up, which will recap the entire race weekend. After that, on Monday, we'll have Grid Encore with Ben and Brandon if he's available. Wednesday, we'll have Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsport news, and we'll do all this all over again next week with NASCAR's race preview. So hit the subscribe button and bell icon to avoid missing any of our programs. Big thank you to our Patreon investors and everyone who has bought a super chat or a buy me a coffee. I'm Tanner Smith from pitboxpress.com, and for Matthew Bro from gridnetworktv.com, thank you for watching this evening and enjoy the racing.